Hey there, folks. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. I'm Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and you've tuned in to the next episode of the Weekly Ratchet. In this episode, I'm going to talk about deliveries. I'm going to talk about companies, but maybe not in the way that you might think, here on the Weekly Ratchet. Yes, folks, yes, welcome to the Weekly Ratchet. I hope you've all had a fantastic week. Things have been a little twisty-turvy here in Ashland, Virginia for the past week or so, but it has still been a pretty decent and pretty productive week. For one thing, I just wrapped up some filming for a review on the Dice Tower of Forge, which is in pieces over here near the table, so I'm just going to flash an image up on the screen, and as soon as this is done, I'll be turning my attention to Voidfall and starting a review for that over on the Dice Tower. I've been putting this off for a while because the script is 7 pages long. Anyways, enough of that. Let's get on to some new games that have come in here to the treehouse, and just bear with me a second because I got this shipment. I got a delivery just the other day. Actually, it was shortly after I filmed the last Ratchet episode, and it has this important little icon right there. Yep, this is a shipment of games from the Dice Tower, and in fact, quite ironically, it was the same day that I got a little paycheck from them for my last month's review, so it was a nice day to get a little money and some games from the Dice Tower. Now, just give me a second. This is a bad idea. It was a bad idea. I didn't think this through. Let me put this over here. Okay. All right.
Okay. Sick as a dog now. Okay.
All right. We're reorganized. Good to go here. Let me start off with the first game out of this big box. This is The Incredible Parks of Miss Liz, which, if you can probably tell here, it is in French. And I did not know that. They put it on the list in English, and so when I looked it up, oh, this looks really neat. It's a game about kind of like making an amusement park. This is obviously an older game. The box is quite beat up, and it quite obviously came off of one of the Dice Tower library shelves. It has the shelf number here on the side. It says it plays 2 to 5, ages 8 and up, 45 to 60 minutes. I know nothing else about this, but I do love a good amusement park game. So we'll see what that brings. Up next, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this game. I'm thinking it is Yongyan or Yongyan. It is a Euro game, definitely a Euro game about the Ming Dynasty in the 1500s. Let me kind of maybe flash the back of this up on the screen, or maybe I'll impose a different image here. Definitely a Euro game. Let me see. This says 90 to 120 minutes, ages 15 and up, 1 to 4 players. Definitely a little on the heavier side, but that is a neat looking cover. And it's a neat looking game just from kind of reading the description on the back a little bit. A quick glance through the rule book. I think there's a lot in here, a lot of components. Looks kind of neat. I think we're going to try and get this one played fairly quick here because there might be a gem there. This is this is called Sausage. I'm assuming that's how we're supposed to pronounce this, Sausage. And when I opened the box and I pulled this thing out, the first thought was, I'll just go ahead and lose this into the garbage can. However, I then noticed that it's by Joking Hazard. You probably cannot see the logo here in the back. Joking Hazard is either it's a subsidiary, I'm not quite sure what the arrangement of the companies are, but it's like a brand of the Cyanide and Happiness comic strip, which is I think a Facebook page, and they may have some other presence, in the industry, but definitely a Facebook kind of comic strip. Very, very inappropriate, and I'll admit I find a lot of the jokes kind of funny. Maybe tells you a little bit about me. I've got the Joking Hazard card game, which was, a spin-off of the Cards Against Humanity, whatever, and that you're playing these comic strips. And I've never really felt that the game worked because what made Cards Against Humanity funny was reading off the cards. In the comic strip, you can't read off the cards. There's sometimes multiple characters. Then you're inclined to try and do voices, and it gets to be a mess real quick. And so you're kind of just sitting there in silence, reading the comic strip, and then just sort of waiting for the laughter. I've never really found the card game to work. But this is obviously from the same company. It says something about building the best sausages, fulfill food orders, and sabotage your rivals. 2 to 4 players, 15 minutes, ages 10 and up. knowing that it's joking hazard, I will probably at least try it out. Also, it looks like it could easily be a little pub game as long as it's not too wildly inappropriate. So we'll see. I'll check that out. This one I was really excited for. This is, I don't know how to pronounce this. I don't know. It's number 9 plus plus or number 9 plus. I'm not sure. This is an expansion to the game of number 9. Number 9, I don't think I've talked about it here on the Ratchet. Number 9 is this sort of a stacking game. You're putting these numbered tiles out, numbers 0 through 9, and you're trying to build vertically. Your first floor of numbers are worth no points, and then for every floor above, each tile is worth its value multiplied by its floor minus 1. So again, your bottom floor is worth no points, but say a 9 on your second floor is going to be 9 times 1 or 9 points. And I think one time I got like an 8 on the 4th floor, so it was 24 points for that one tile. I love number 9. My copy that I have behind me is completely custom. I 3D printed everything in the box except for the rule book. I can play up to 10 players on my copy. There's 20 of each tile instead of 8 in the base game. This adds more stuff to it. So this adds some rule breaking cards, and you get like 2 of these little cubes, and you can choose on your on each round, because it's a simultaneous play game. You can choose which rule breaking tile you want to activate. You can only activate each tile once. You can only activate 2 tiles through the whole game. There's that variant. There's another variant which adds some extra pieces that you can kind of use to fill in little gaps. Certainly enjoy that. It adds an additional, there was an extra pieces expansion which adds these kind of 4 block tiles. I think of a lot of the Tetris pieces, the L's, the Cleveland, and I can't remember what the other one's called, but the ones that kind of look like a Z or an S, they actually have names. And so it added those, but this one adds 5 square pieces. So they're a little bigger, a little bit more complex, a little bit more variety you can make out of those. And again, I can 3D print my own versions of those fairly easily. I still have all the files that I can make them. And so yeah, when they had this on the list, I was like, oh, please be the expansion, because it just said number 9 on the list from the Dice Tower. And this is obviously what I got. So very, very excited to check out the new expansion to number 9. That is a great intro game, a great game to bring to people who do not play games. If I'm going to someone's house and I'm just confident that they do not own or play any board games, I'll bring number 9. Up next is Time Division, and this one's kind of fun because you have no idea which way is up, right? Not a clue. Even the company icon is in both corners, you sneaky little bastards. So we'll put up the back of the box. I've read the rule book on this. I have no idea what it's about. I understand the basic gameplay premise, but I really have no idea what it's about. You're playing cards. The core premise to the game is that each player is blue and their opponent is red. And they've done that by having these little 3D cardboard platforms that sit on the small board. And so the color facing you on this 3D platform is always blue, and on the opposing side it's red. So no matter which side of the table you're sitting on, you're the blue player, so on and so forth. And the idea is that you're trying to trigger various card effects. You each play a card. Whoever has the highest number then gets to choose which card gets resolved by its owner and which card gets to basically be scored by its owner. And then each card has, wildly different effects. And there's also 3 eras in the game. So you're playing through, and these are weird eras, right? It is Ancient Egypt. Okay, fine. The Dark Ages, interesting. And the 1980s. What? I have no idea. And I don't see any of that theme coming through in the cards, right? It is really, really, really strange. And like I said, I read the rule book and I came away scratching my head. There's a ton of iconography on the cards. The last 2 or 3 pages of the rule book is all glossaries of all these different icons, which is good. That's helpful. But I feel like especially your first few games of this are going to be really tediously slow as you try to not only understand what each card does, but what each card would do if triggered by you or by your opponent, because that's the decision space that you have to work with for most of this game. Seems weird. I was actually hoping to get this played this past week. It didn't quite happen, but I will be checking out Time Division. Just a few more left here. This next one is Black Friday by Freedom and Freese. I used to always think that was like a brand, Freedom and Freese, but I learned a while ago it's his first name, Freedom and Freese. Black Friday is a stock market game. You're basically trying to buy and sell stocks before the stock market crashes. The stock market fluctuation is a bit random. You're drawing, I believe, cards that sort of dictate how the stock market values move. So it's somewhat driven by players, but then you also have a lot of ability if you're working with one particular stock, you may or may not end up fluctuating other stocks, again, randomly. So it doesn't have that element of, okay, well, this market's really high, so I'm going to ride that wave, because it could crash, and not even because another player makes it crash. The rulebook, not good. I've read through this again. We were going to play this last week. Didn't happen. We ended up kind of canceling our game day spur of the moment. But anyways, this was really tough for me to sift through. But I am going to try and get this played. My friend Daniel, I've mentioned many times, is a big sort of economy stock market game guy. So we'll play this, and I'm pretty sure it's going to wind up being his when we're done. But anyways, that is Black Friday. The last game is Drop Drive. This is by Phase Shift Games. And you know what? I'm going to talk about this here in a little bit because I've already gotten a chance to play it. So that is, I think, that is everything. Yeah, the box is empty. That's everything that is new to the Treehouse this week. What have you picked up? What have you acquired? Let me know in the comments. And until then, let's move on. All right, time to talk about some crowdfunding, and I'm going to be honest, two things here. I didn't really get any feedback to the sort of new formula that I introduced last week. That's okay. Viewership was down a little bit last week, no problem. I also haven't been looking at a whole lot of Kickstarter or GameFound project lately. I don't think I even finished watching the last crowd surfing video from the Dice Tower. There's been too much going on, and I'm trying to save some money. But I'll check out just a couple of games real quick. First of all, Max Power last week commented on Roth. This is by Chip Theory Games. Now, I have never played a Chip Theory game. Believe it or not, I have just never really had a chance. Cloudspire sounds kind of interesting, but I've never gotten to play it. I owned, for about 6 hours, maybe a little bit more, the game of Hoplomachus. I got it from a Dice Tower retreat, sort of a game trade event that they do every year, and it was really big, really heavy, and I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to get it home. A player or a fellow gamer expressed interest in it, and I sold it to him the next morning, and so there it went already. So I've never played a Chip Theory game. I don't have anything against them, I really don't, although to me, just stacks of chips that you're moving around a board doesn't really just sound very interesting. I like, standees or minis or something like that. Again, no slight to it. I know their games are insanely popular. This one is also doing very well as far as funding goes. The cover and sort of the bright neon colors right away just sort of turns me off. But apparently it's kind of a lighter weight game. Max Power said it has a small footprint. They definitely do a lot with production value. Obviously, their big thing is various poker chips. Here's some square chips, which I'd say is kind of unusual for them. Lots of stuff. I don't know anything about this, so feel free to weigh in if it's a game that you're interested in. I'd love to hear your comments, but I don't know anything else about Roth. Up next is Algae Inc. Now, this one's kind of interesting. This is from Game Brewer, and I had to look up. Game Brewer is known for quite a lot of games. They've got, what was this I saw? They brought Gugong, which is a TMG game. I still have it down here. They have Paris, Chimera Station, Oak, a really big game, Stroganoff. So they're really well known for some pretty decent games, but this game is not even funding. 6 days left to its campaign. And you can bet that even if they hit that goal of 25,000, it will probably be canceled because the goal is not really 25,000. We all know this quite well. The only thing I can think, and I had a conversation with a friend about this recently, and I'll talk about it coming up here just a little bit, but these nature games, these plant type games, there are just so many of these things coming out lately that I wonder if people are getting burnt out on these. What do you think? Cascadia, I mentioned in the past, Life of the Amazonia, Forests of Pangaea, Earth, what's the other one? Not Wintergreen, what the heck is it called? Evergreen. And there's another one I was just thinking of, and it's leaving my mind. But we have Planted, that's what it is, Planted. So many of these nature-themed games. I think it's great when you're dealing with animals and such, but just plants, they're not that interesting. And so I don't know if that's why this game isn't doing that well, or if it just hasn't really been advertised very well. I mean, I've only seen about it information through social media, so I'm not sure. what I think is kind of neat with this is that if you look down through it here, this is not one of those just playing cards to a tableau or a tableau builder like Life of the Amazonia or Earth. It's a little different of a formula. It almost has this kind of a Risk type look to it, with these kind of paths on the board and your, maybe area control. You're moving cubes around. I mean, again, I don't know anything about how it plays. It shows on Board Game Geek that it's a quite heavy game. I don't know. I'm surprised it's not funding. But there's bound to be flame out, right, from time to time. But anyways, this is Algae by Game Brewer. Curious to know your thoughts on this one. And the last one that I pulled up here for this week, this is River Valley. This is by All Play. All Play games, I've played a small handful of All Play games. They come across with a lot of like Toy Factor or just very lightweight games. I've played Mountain Goats, which I do not understand why that game is as popular as it seems to be. It was really, really boring and repetitive and tedious to me. I've played GPS. It's the one game that I have. Again, high toy factor. You're sort of spinning this little rocket and just moving these satellites. Very simple, a decent pub game. But, even my family was like, meh. I played QE. I like QE. I like the idea of QE. I do think there's kind of I feel like the pace of that game gets set in the first turn. And if you make a bad mistake, you can just lose the game on the first turn. Maybe I'll talk about that someday, but not today. But it's a minimum like 3-player game, and I don't get to do a whole lot of 3-player games, so I've never added it to the collection. This is River Valley Glassworks. I don't know anything about this. Their production value is always really high. I like these kind of glass tokens that it comes with. Looks like you're kind of going down a river and trying to collect various components, maybe a set collection aspect. I don't know. Let's real quick see if I can go back to the Board Game Geek page and just check up some of the mechanisms of this. So let's see, we've got, and game bonuses, modular board, that's kind of cool, open drafting, pattern building, okay, tile placement, okay. Those are systems that don't really jump out at me personally, but obviously everyone has their own cup of tea. So are you checking out River Valley Glassworks? Let me know in the comments. That's it for crowdfunding this week. Like I said, I'm kind of stepping back a little bit from the crowdfunding games, platforms, Kickstarter, GameFound, that kind of stuff. But let me know what you're checking out in the comments. And for now, let's move on. All right, moving on to question of the week. As I mentioned earlier, it was a little bit of a slow week this week. I'm going to chalk it up to good weather and maybe folks getting outside. I also know that PAX East, I think, was taking place in the past week, so maybe some folks are off on that. Kind of low viewership, low comments, but that's okay. It means I can get through this video a little quicker. Let me kick it off with our good buddy Carl Tunist, who said that he is more of a light to midweight gamer, and for the most part likes games like Sushi Go, Machi Koro, Karuba, King Domino, and Carcassonne. I've only played a handful of those games myself, but he then went on to say that he was surprised when he played London at a local game club because he actually began to understand it by the end of the game. And I'm going to say, Carl, I think you're kind of shortchanging yourself there just a little bit to say that, well, I was surprised that I understood a slightly harder game. I think all games, even Carcassonne, I've taught Carcassonne to people who initially are going, I don't know, what are you talking about? Like, what is this? And it's often because they haven't played any games at all, right? The last game they played was Sorry or Monopoly, which even Monopoly can be a bit of an unpredictable game, especially if you play it by the proper rules. Anyways, and I think that a lot of folks tend to say, well, I can't play those harder games. You may not like the harder games, and I can certainly appreciate and understand and sympathize with that, and I'm not saying that, oh, you should push yourself to play harder games. Not at all. But sometimes I feel like folks tend to shortchange themselves and say, oh, I can't learn a Lacerda game, or those are too hard for me. And that's not really true. It all comes down to the teach. It all comes down to how well is someone, or how willing is someone to sort of sit there and guide you through your turns. I would certainly not recommend going to a game convention, and just sitting down to a Lacerda game and, okay, hey, I'm just going to wing this, because you're going to probably draw out the experience for everyone else and they may have an unpleasant time. But I am one of those who likes to invite people over, like, hey, do you want to play something harder? Do you want to play, maybe there's a game that they've really been interested in, but they just haven't quite had the right opportunity to play it. And I would say, hey, I'll teach it to you, and I'll kind of walk you through your turns, and we'll have a more casual approach, but maybe only at 2 players, and then we can kind of sit there and work through the game systems on a more casual pace. So a good comment, and again, I'm not saying, oh, go play harder games and don't play those sissy games. That's certainly not the idea here. But don't discredit yourself and don't discredit your ability to learn new stuff and push your horizons if that's what you want to do. Max Power 8973 said he's mostly a cooperative gamer and likes the complex, heavy games where they're all working together. He then ended this with a comment that said, "One team, one dream to defeat Cthulhu." You had me right until the end there, Max. I've never been into that whole Cthulhu franchise. What are they called? The Dark Gods or whatever they are. I've just never gotten into that theme at all. But I have certainly, I have been surprised with some of the more complex, heavy, competitive or cooperative games. Sorry. And I mentioned one in the past, I think Atlantis Rising. Atlantis Rising isn't incredibly complex, but it adds sort of a random element more so than what you've normally seen or what I've normally seen out of cooperative games, right? All these cooperative games will have usually cards that you draw and they kind of make random things, usually negative things happen to you. This one also has sort of a random element on your side in that you're rolling dice to try and get resources, and it dictates how many of each resource you get. And so you may go in and say, okay, we're going to try really hard to get the, what is it? Not adamantium. That's a movie. Anyways, you're trying to get certain resources. You chuck the dice. You don't get what you need. And then you're kind of like, well, geez, now what are we going to do? Because, we have to make something out of this stuff. We may not get another chance to mine this stuff. We've got to get something done. And that was a game where we finished, I think we were playing 4 or 5 of us, and we were all standing around the table like generals planning our strategy against, the sinking island of Atlantis. And that was a great game. So I definitely can agree with you there. Those cooperative games that don't necessarily allow for the quarterbacking or the alpha gaming type aspect, like the pandemic games certainly can. But the games that are certainly more complex, that really kind of make each player think about what can they contribute to the team, are the ones that are very interesting to me as well. So I can see that 100%. Tony Lawhorn said that he likes a wide range of games from party to complex, but that midweight is his sweet spot, 2 to 3 hour games. And I kind of had to laugh when I saw that, Tony, because I've played, what's the game? I had to bring it up here because I cannot remember what it's called. It's a kids' table board game called Creature Comforts. A very lightweight, sort of a dice drafting, dice placement game, trying to get resources to build cutesy little things to help your animals hibernate through the winter. And at 3 to 4 players, this game can easily run over 2 hours, but it is a very lightweight game. And so I just thought that was kind of funny that was the threshold you gave yourself when that can still stick you with a very lightweight game. But I'm with you, right? I do like some good party games. One of my favorite party games is Anomia, which is just a silly card game, but I've never laughed so hard in a game. And then, of course, I've got the Lacerdas and the Terzi games, all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. Last comment here is from Mark B, who said that he didn't really know where he fit into the complexity range, and so he went and looked up some of his ratings on Board Game Geek because he does love a good crunchy game, and then went on to say that his favorite game is Obsession, which is kind of a low to medium 3 on the complexity rating of Board Game Geek. And I do like Obsession, Mark. That's a good recommendation. It's a good title. Obsession, I think, works pretty well because there's a lot of different systems working together in a way that we don't normally see. Worker placement and deck building, we've seen that in a couple different games. But then there's also this whole idea of kind of building out this estate and trying to trigger out different things. It's worker placement, but not in the traditional sense. You're not just placing a worker to take an action. You're choosing the action that you want to take, the room of your estate that you want to use, and then hoping that you have the right elements in your deck and the right workers available to make that work. I do enjoy that game. The only problem I find with Obsession is if you're sitting there and you've been planning your turn and you planned it wrong and you're suddenly on your turn and you suddenly realize that you miscalculated something, then you got to sit there and completely rethink your turn, and it just really can drag on that game. I don't think I'd ever play this at much more than 3 again because it just takes too long, but a very good game. And I think that's kind of my sweet spot too. I like the sort of medium heavy, as they say. I like games a little more in the 4 range. And I've talked about a lot of those. I know I always gesture to this wall over here, which you folks can't see. Maybe I'll throw a picture of this up, but this is my heavy wall. This back here is my light wall. I've got some hodgepodge games on here on the floor, but all this stuff is my heavy stuff, and I'll just read off some of the titles to you. I've got Eclipse, I have Fractal, which I still haven't gotten to play. I have Hegemony, Dinogenics, Evacuation, Brewcrafters, which is modeled after Agricola, a fairly heavy game, Horseless Carriage, Underwater Cities, Monumental, which isn't really that heavy. I probably need to get rid of that game. Coffee Traders is down here. Flotilla, that is a very, very complex game that I've only gotten to play a few times. It is a bear to teach. Alchemists, it's one of the first games we ever had, and I think my brain is still a little on fire from it. Civilization New Dawn, Evacuation Earth, one of the Turtsy games that I have. Very heavy game. Star Trek Frontiers, and a lot of Alvin VR, well, not a lot of Alvin VR, but some Alvin VR games. Clinic, Small City, and then all my Lacerdas, On Mars, Kanban, Venos, Escape Plan, Gallerist, Kanban EV, my couple of spotter games. I already mentioned Horseless Carriage, Bus, Food Chain Magnate is down there, and then a couple other things are great. I got High Frontier for All, which I've never played yet, because I haven't had a chance to get through that rule book. But those are where my games, my interests lie. And I've talked about this before in the Ratchet. I like those games where you have a lot of flexibility in what you can do, but then obviously the more that you do, maybe the more expensive it gets. I like games where you can do anything you want on your turn, but you only get so many turns maybe, or maybe those actions get more and more expensive, like an Eclipse or Evacuation, as I've already talked about. Those games where the path that you take is entirely up to you, and you can wreck yourself. And so I am often sitting there going, okay, I'm going to do this action, then I'm going to do this action. I kind of stack my cards up in a way that I keep myself organized. I even did that when I played Wingspan, which is not one of my favorite games by any means, but I would put the cubes on the rows, because you have these action cubes that trigger the actions that you're going to take, and I would kind of put them almost like a music, a musical arrangement. Okay, I'm going to do this one, then this one, this one, this one, this one. And so it kind of looked like a scale going across the side of my board as a reminder to myself of which actions I want to take next. And that is how I like to play. I like to kind of plan out what I'm going to do. And so I don't like games as well. I don't work as well with games that are a lot more on the tactical side when I have to constantly change up my plans. I just don't do well with that. It's not, I think, the way that I'm wired to function. And so games where I can really plan out my next couple of turns. And then, of course, there's that element where, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to grab that tile, and then in between, someone grabs that tile, and I got to completely revise my plan. Those can really piss me off sometimes. Oftentimes, and as I've gotten more and more, involved in games, as I've gotten a little better at gaming, I'll often try and kind of prepare some branching options. Okay, well, if that tile's gone, I'm going to try and get this one, or I'm going to do this instead. I try to kind of plan that stuff out. Doesn't always work for me, but again, that's the sweet spot for me. So I like complexity, but there are certainly lighter weight games, medium weight games that let you do that same thing. I can't think of any off the top of my head. I think Project L is probably a pretty good example of a game where you can maximize your efforts. You can kind of plan to get the most out of your turns. There's some player interaction. Okay, I'm hoping I can grab that tile. Damn it, my wife took it or whatever. But you can still really focus on squeezing the most out of everyone in your turns. That min-maxing, as I believe it's called, is something that I really enjoy. Okay, if I do this right now, I can get a little bit done, but if I wait and I do something else first and then do that action, I can get so much more out of it. And there's a lot of games that let you do that, and that is certainly my sweet spot for complexity. So that is my topic for this week. And you know what? I didn't think about a topic for next week. So let me just draw something out of the mind bag here. We'll go real simple on this one. Tell me what your favorite mechanism of gaming is. So this might be deck building. It might be worker placement. It might be hand management, tableau building, chucking dice, anything like that. Just tell me what your favorite mechanism is, and then make sure you toss in a game. Let me know a game that is just your favorite game in that category, your favorite deck builder, your favorite dice chucker, whatever. Let me know in the comments, and let's see what we get. Looking forward to it. Let's move on. All right, let's get to games played here for the week. As I mentioned, this week didn't quite go according to plan. I had a game day planned with my buddy Daniel on Thursday of last week. We were going to get through a whole bunch of two-player games, including some of the stuff that the Dice Tower sent me. And then he had to cancel. He had some family issues come up. It happens. So I jumped down to a gaming event here in the Richmond area at a little brewery called Three Notched. And only got to play one game. There was kind of some different that's a different event. They play a lot of the medium to lightweight stuff. I've seen things like taco, goat, cat, cheese, pizza, whatever the heck that game is called, played there. Not my kind of game. But I did get to play Planted. This is by Phil Walker Harding. I had picked this up at a math trade here in the area a month or so ago. This is a drafting game where you're trying to grow plants, as I was talking about, another one of those environmental type games or nature themed games, and you're trying to grow plants. You're drafting cards that then give you the resources that you need to grow the plants. There's either sun or water or a sort of plant food or fertilizer. And then there's like these thumbs up tokens, which just kind of count as half of a wild. So you need 2 of those to make another resource. And then if you can get enough resources played to a plant, the plant grows. You put a little token on it that's worth points at the end of the game. However, any resources that you have left over at the end of each round, which is drafting 8 cards, that's a single round, any of your remaining resources get lost. If you do have 2 resources, you can just get a extra point basically, so you can spend any pair of resources at the end of each round to just grab an extra point. I'm not a huge fan of drafting games, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in the last round of this game, I had 5 players, which is a limit, and it was too much. At the last round, we were passing the cards around, and of course it's one of those where, well, in these rounds you pass them to the left, and in these rounds you pass them to the right. Like it matters. Seriously, like it matters. But anyways, we were drafting cards, and I had 2 cards, and I passed them on, and the guy to my left passed his 2 cards on, but this guy had 3 cards, and the guy across me had 3 cards, and then you're sitting going, well, what the heck happened? Who screwed this up? You're probably supposed to discard your cards, maybe you forgot to, or someone messed up somewhere, and there's too many cards. And then what do you do, right? Well, I guess we'll just randomly pick one and get rid of. You're of course sitting there thinking, well, have we played 6 rounds already? Should we have 2 cards left? I hate when drafting games do that. Sushi Go, I've had that happen. Isle of Cats, that happens so much because you're keeping batches. I think you're passing 7 cards, and you keep 3, and then you keep 2, and then you keep 3, and you keep 1. And you got all these different stacks, and you have your previous hand, and it gets to be a mess, and people get confused, and you run into those situations every single time. So I just don't like drafting games. We also had a player who I had to keep kind of telling him the same rules over and over and over again. It gets frustrating, and it's all of it for a very, very lightweight game. Not a whole ton of decision space. You kind of get your hand of cards like, well, these suck. I don't want any of these. And especially in the last 2 rounds of the game, I got tool cards, which are completely useless in the last 2 rounds of the game because all they do is they help you get extra resources. Well, I'm only going to get one more chance of getting a resource, and what are the chances it's going to be the resource that the tool works with, which it wasn't. So I kind of had to just waste my last 2 turns. I'm glad I got to try it. It reminded me a little bit of Verdant, which is by, I can't remember the name of the publisher. I'll throw it down here. They made Cascadia, and they made Calico, and then Verdant, I think, was their most recent one. They also made Fit to Print, not Renegade. I cannot remember the name of the publisher. Anyways, I liked Verdant better. It's still very random, but without all the frustration of drafting. So anyways, glad I got to play it. Probably will be trying to offload that one fairly quick. Then, and I've talked about this one already, my wife and I played Drop Drive. This game is weird. It's a weird game. You're playing on this, they sent me the mat, so I have the mat for this. You can just play it on a table surface. You got this wooden sun you put in the middle, and then you're dropping all of your tokens onto the sun to randomly scatter them across a solar system. And at the beginning of the game, you're also dropping the planets and these asteroids and all this kind of stuff. You big bang the universe or the solar system at the beginning of the game. And then you've got these little plastic, kind of like snake tokens. They look like something that Lego makes. You snap these things in each other and you kind of bend them and adjust them to dictate where your ship is going to go. You can possibly lengthen them by upgrading your ships. There's a lot going on in this game. It reminds me of Wormholes, which is an AEG game, where you're picking up passengers and delivering them to different planets. You're jumping across wormholes, which this game doesn't quite do, but you have a drop drive where you get to pick up your ship and then drop it from about 5 inches up on certain spots of the board, depending on the abilities of your ship. And so that kind of works like the wormhole thing. It uses an energy, and then you're always, anything that you spend, you're redropping into the universe at that stage in your turn. And so you're constantly repopulating the solar system with other things to go and get. You have these pirate ships that are matched to your color, so you kind of control your color matching pirate, although you can still be attacked by or attack your pirate. So it's not like it's an extension of your own character. It's just a ship out there that you kind of control and you dictate what it does. And there's a lot more to it, right? There's markets. You're trying to sell these asteroid pieces to the various planets. There's a engine building aspect in that you can upgrade your ship. You can also pick up passengers and drop them off. You can also find these, what are they called? Specimens, I believe they're called, which are kind of a set collection thing, kind of, sort of. Each one scores differently, and so as you're playing, you may find a specimen that works better with one that you have, and so maybe you'll trash one. You can only carry so many of these things, and they're just kind of on your ship. Almost reminded me of Flight of the Navigator and all the specimens that ship and the alien had collected through all these different planets. It was really interesting. The rule book, not so great. We really had a lumpy start to getting into this game. But by the time we were done, and my wife beat me quite well at this game, and we were kind of sitting there for quite a while, more so than often, or longer than usual, I should say, sort of picking apart the game and what did we think about this, and this part was really weird, but I really like this, and it's also a very customizable game. There are these anomalies which we didn't actually play with because I just couldn't. I was trying to understand too many rules in too short a period of time, so we left out the anomaly thing. I would also say that it probably doesn't shine its best at 2. You probably need to have more going on in this game. I'm kind of hoping that when I have some friends coming to visit in April, that maybe we can check this out with some more players. And I actually went out and I bought some of the extra expansion stuff for this just yesterday because I would like to see what else this game has to offer. And that is Drop Drive. I've talked too much about it. You might hear more about that coming up. And then last night we did have some company come over and we played Let's Go to Japan. I've mentioned this already a couple times here in the channel, so I'm not going to go into the gameplay really. I don't remember which episode I talked about it. I think it was 6 or 7. I talked about Let's Go to Japan. A very, very lightweight game, and the only thing that I will say is that I've played it now 3 times, at 3 and 2 and now 5, and I'm already starting to feel a little samey about it. I'm starting to see a lot of the same cards. I went to the same board game store in this latest playthrough. The components are fantastic. This is, of course, the Kickstarter edition, but the one thing that remains fun is that when we played it last night at 5, instead of doing the simultaneous resolution of your trip at the end of the game, which is what the rulebook sort of recommends as your default way of playing, we played it with the, for your first time rules, which is each one of you does your trip individually. And we've always played it that way, and I suspect that we always will, because that's where this game sort of shines. And that's where you're telling a story of, okay, I went on my trip and I did this. And even though the cards don't really give you a lot of context to work with, the symbols on them enable you to tell your own story. So for example, on the day where you want to go to a whole bunch of statues and pagodas or whatever, you can sort of narrate your own story because you've got some different symbols. They're not different. They're all the pagodas and statue symbol. But maybe the last one has like a stress icon. And you go, okay, well, I went to this statue and I go up on that track. And then I went to another statue and I go up on that track. And I went to another statue and I go up on that track. But I was getting a little stressed because I'm tired of seeing statues. And so you pip your stress marker down. And that kind of becomes, a little humorous for everyone around the table. What was especially funny at 5 is that we started to see that we had a lot of similar cards because there are duplicate cards in the box, which at first was obnoxious at 2 players because, I have a card that, and in fact, even in the 5-player game, on one particular day, I went to go see 2 concerts, the same card, the same symbols on the same day, which is just a little boring. But our friends both went to a spa on the same day in the same place. It was the first thing they did that day on both days. And so we were joking about, that's why you had a good time at the spa. I see. Okay, I get it. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right? My wife and I had the same card on the very first day, but we actually had different icons on it. So I was like, well, we obviously went to the same place, but I stuck around to do some extra shopping, which is probably why you ditched me and I didn't see you for the whole rest of the week. I see how it goes. And it was those emerging stories, entirely player driven, that made this funny. We were sitting there cracking up, laughing, telling jokes, making our own stories out of these cards. In no way, shape, or form is that built into the game, but it just naturally happened. And so we really had a lot of fun with it, even though it is starting to get fairly repetitive. A neat game. My daughter is in love with this game, although I wonder how much longer it's going to last for her because of that same thing. She can only go to Pontacho so many times or whatever, and then, okay, I've seen this, I've done this. What else does the game have to offer? There are some expansions we haven't used yet. We were going to break those out, but I didn't want to introduce new gamers with all the expansion content, so I'm sure we'll be getting to that soon. And that's it. That is the end of the Weekly Ratchet. I hope you've all had a good time. Thank you for watching the show. I'm curious to see some of your comments. Don't forget to answer the question of the week. Let me know what crowdfunding games you're following, maybe what new games you've gotten. Let me know. Get involved in the comments. I love hearing from you guys. But that is it. Tune in next week for the next episode of the Weekly Ratchet. We'll see you then. Cheers.